ago, in a land far, far away, a boy named Jack lived with his mother on their farm. Jack's father died when Jack was very small, so it was just the two of them working together to take care of the farm. His mother loved Jack very much. She doted on him as he grew, and she did everything for Jack. Then, one day, Jack's mother didn't feel well and went to bed early. Then she didn't get up at all the next day. On the third day, Jack went to fetch the doctor. As the doctor closed his bag, he said, "Your mother is very ill. Jack, I'm afraid she needs medicine." Jack knew that they didn't have any money for medicine. He looked down at his scuffed boots and said, "Can she get out of bed?" The doctor sighed and knelt down in front of Jack, putting his large hand on his shoulder kindly. "I'm afraid not, Jack. Not until she gets the medicine." The doctor gave him a pat on the shoulder and smiled warmly at the boy. "I guess that makes you the man of the house now." Jack smiled back weakly. He looked over at his mother, who was sleeping peacefully. He didn't know how to be the man of the house, but for his mother, he would try. After the doctor left, Jack went over to the table and sat down. He laid his head on his arms and started making a list of everything that he needed to do to take care of the farm. He was worried. It was a long list. Jack left his worries at the table. He ate the last of the bread his mother had baked before she got sick and put himself to bed. He laid in his bed looking up at the rafters. He whispered out loud to no one, "I will find a way to take care of my mother. No matter what, I will not let her down." The sun woke Jack early. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stretched his arms high over his head in the morning light. He dressed quickly and climbed down from the loft where he slept. He tiptoed over to his mother's bed. She was awake. "Mother," said Jack, grabbing her hand, "I'm going out to feed the animals." She smiled up at him from her pillow, her eyes shining with pride. Jack gave her hand a squeeze, kissed her cheek, and headed out into the farmyard, grabbing his hat that hung by the door. First, Jack went out to milk the cows and feed her. He loved his cow. She had beautiful brown fur with big, soft brown eyes that matched it. She was on the thin side, but still produced the sweetest, creamiest milk for Jack and his mother. She was almost like a pet to Jack. He talked to her about his mother's illness and how he needed to get the money to buy her medicine. The cow listened to Jack while he milked her, swishing her tail at a fly from time to time. He fed her some sweet hay that he had gathered from the fields earlier that month and made sure she had some fresh, clean water to drink. Then he headed out to take care of the chickens and ducks. The chickens and ducks were already awake, pecking and scratching at the dirt to see if there was anything left to eat. When the birds saw him, they quacked and clucked and fussed and cock-a-doodled. Jack was worried that he was late. He rushed over to the feed shed and tripped over his boots. When he fell, he hit a bucket with his hand, sending it flying into a barrel, which then fell over with a loud crash. This made the birds quack and cluck and cock-a-doodle more. Jack climbed up and dusted off his clothes as he continued to the feed barn. Frustrated, he yanked on the door to the shed with all his might. He was strong, and the door flung open and smacked loudly on the side of the shed. The birds startled again and let Jack know they were not happy, with more quacking, clucking, and cock-a-doodling. Finally, Jack got the feed and went over to the coop where the chickens were kept. He tossed the seed on the ground. At first, the birds seemed to say, "Go away, noisy boy." Then they pecked at his feet and hands. They did not like to have someone new in their territory. They were used to Jack's mother and her gentle, quiet ways. Jack had small, quick feet, and he jumped around the chicken coop, startling them. They continued to fuss with him. Then he realized that he had to learn to be quiet and gentle, and to make friends with the hens and their chicks. So he did. He stopped jumping around the chicken coop, and he put their cracked corn and water into their bowls without being noisy. The birds settled down and regarded him differently when he calmed down. Some chicks had been born the past week. Jack loved their bright yellow, furry-looking feathers. He put some cracked corn in his hands and sat down. Then he sat there perfectly still. Some of the chicks inched closer to him, while their mothers watched from the side of the coop. Jack sat still for a very long time. The chicks inched closer, wanting the corn he had spread across his palms. Eventually, the bravest chick came close to Jack's hands. "It's okay, little fella," said Jack softly. "I won't hurt you." The chick slowly came close enough to get a piece of corn. Jack still didn't move a muscle. Then, all of a sudden, the chick quickly grabbed the corn and backed up from Jack. He sat there waiting. The brave chick went back and got another corn and ran away. Jack still sat there. The chick went back a third time. Then Jack slowly raised one of his hands and gently stroked the brave chick's downy feathers. The chick ate the feed and let Jack pet him. The mother hen watched with concern for a while, but soon was back to scratching and pecking for corn herself, knowing that Jack would take care of them. He gathered the eggs from the loud, clucky hens. At first they fussed and pecked at his little hands, but then he tried moving slowly and gently with them. The birds fussed with him less. He gathered the eggs and was ready to go sell them at the market. Once he had gathered the eggs, he fed the ducks in their pond. Then Jack decided to see if there was any fruit on the trees. His mother had taught him long ago to pick the ripe fruit early each morning, or the squirrels and birds will beat you to it. Jack did not want them to beat him to it. If the squirrels or birds take all the apples, cherries, and oranges, there won't be anything for him to take to the market to sell with the eggs. Then Jack and his mother won't have the money they need for his mother's medicine. The apple trees especially are tall. He looks up at the red, gleaming fruit. The best ones are always on the tips of the highest branches where they get the most sun. But Jack is afraid when climbing the highest top branches. He feels very small next to the large trees in the orchard. The branches look so high. Sometimes he wonders if he will ever reach the top. But he starts climbing, one branch at a time. Jack is brave and climbs carefully. By the time he reaches the middle of the tree, he feels better because the top looks much closer. Once Jack did fall out of the tree, but he wasn't badly hurt. He stood up, dusted himself off, and started up again, being more careful of his handholds and footing this time. He didn't have time to waste falling and starting over. He had to pick all the fruit he could so he could go to the market and try to get enough money for his mother's medicine. First, he picks apples and next the cherries. Then he picks the oranges. The orange trees are thorny, so he has to climb them slowly. But he does the best he can to not hurt the flowers or branches where new fruits will grow. That morning, he climbed dozens of trees. Then he gathered the fruit he picked in a large basket and hauled it back to the farmyard to wash and sort for the market. He had done this for his mother lots of times, for even when she was well, she did not climb the trees. He always liked to watch how she chose which fruits she would sell and which ones she would keep. She always picked the best apple and gave it to him. Today, he found the roundest, reddest, and crunchiest apple. He washed it and took it in to his mother. She was sleeping again. Her face looked small on the pillow. He did not want to wake her, so he left it on the table beside her bed. When he had washed and sorted the fruit and gathered up all the eggs he had from the hens, he loaded the baskets on the back of their cow to carry them to the market. He was ready to go. He grabbed his mother's money pouch and was surprised at how light it seemed. He knew that they were poor, but even for them, this was very little money. He knew that he had to get more money or he wouldn't be able to pay for his mother's medicine. Determined to succeed, he put the pouch in his pocket, walked out the farmyard where his cow was waiting with his fruit and eggs, picked up the cow's lead, and marched down the road to the market in the village 2 miles away. Jack did well. When he returned from the market, he had a few more coins in the pouch. He even had a loaf of bread and some cheese that he had traded for with the eggs. He was proud of how he had done, but he was also worried. He had sold all the fruit, but still didn't have enough money for the medicine. The road was quiet that afternoon. He saw very few travelers on his way back to the farm. It was then that he saw the old man for the first time. Jack was poor. He had clothes that had been mended and shoes that he had worn for years, with socks stuffed in the toes until his foot had finally crowded them out. But by then, they were scuffed and worn and nearly had a hole in the sole. But next to the old man, Jack looked rich as a king. The man was old and stooped. He wore clothes that hung on his thin body like rags, as if they had once belonged to a man twice his size who had already worn them for many, many years. He had an old-fashioned cloak that he wore fastened at the neck, like a knight from years past. He had stockings on that had holes in both knees. The boots that he wore on his foot had no laces, and one of them had no heel, so when he walked, he lumbered about like a limping beast. His hands were curled around a dirty cord that held his pack slung across his back. The filthy pack was also patched like the man's clothes and cloak, but had a beautiful letter M embroidered across the front of it. The pack bounced and bobbled on his back as he limped down the road toward Jack. When the man drew closer, he said, "A wonderful evening tonight, I expect." "Yes, sir," answered Jack, remembering his manners. He wouldn't want his mother to be ashamed of him. "A lovely cow you have. You must be proud to have such a fine animal." "She is, sir. I am proud of her." The old man smiled at Jack, who noticed immediately that his teeth were missing in the front. The ones that remained were badly discolored. Jack looked away so he wouldn't stare at the man's teeth. "A lovely animal," the old man murmured, then turned to walk away down the road. Jack watched the man leave, wondering where he was going and if he would have a hot meal tonight. He doubted it, and he turned to call the man back to give him some of the bread and cheese he had from the market. But when he turned around, the man had vanished from the road. Jack shivered and hurried faster home to the farm, his cow plodding along behind him on the dusty, rutted road. When Jack got back to the farm, he took the bread and cheese to his mother. She was awake and asked him all about his day. He told her how he had traded for the bread and cheese so they would have something to eat. He told her how he had sold all the fruit. She smiled and nodded while she ate, taking small bites and chewing slowly. When Jack had finished his bread and cheese, his mother looked tired, so he tucked her in and kissed her forehead. She was asleep again before he made it to the door of her room. He looked back at his mother sleeping, and he felt afraid. He wanted her to have the medicine she needed, but he knew that selling the fruit would not make enough money. Jack went to the table and lit a candle to do his reading. His mother had taught him to read a few years ago. They did not have any books of their own, but a lady in the village let him borrow books from the bookshop to read. He chose all kinds of books on many different subjects. He loved to lose himself in the words and stories that he found on the pages that he turned. Jack wanted to learn about amazing things. He wanted to know all about the big world and all the animals and people in it. He wanted to go to school someday and become a doctor so he could help heal his mother and all the other sick people in the world. Tonight, though, he only read a short while. He was very tired from his busy day and the long walk to and from the market. He changed into his nightshirt, washed his face, and brushed his teeth. When he climbed into his soft, warm bed, he thought of the old man he saw on the road and wondered where he was sleeping. Jack hoped that he had a place to stay that was warm and dry. Jack was still thinking about the old man when he fell asleep. He didn't even notice that he had left the window unlocked.